My name is Natasha, and this is the Liminal World project. Today, I'm continuing with my new guest. Please welcome Shannon Perkins Carr. Shannon is Canadian. She was born and raised in Vancouver, but today I will meet her here in Victoria on Vancouver Island, where she lives. Shannon and I are going to talk today about the experience which has reshaped, redirected, and changed our lives, hers as well as mine, which is an immigration, or living, working somewhere outside of your country of origin. We will touch on topics such as culture shock, reverse culture shock, transition, and all the challenges that come with it. And I also want to use this opportunity to talk about this current situation of re-entry, reopening, and the possible struggles some people can feel with that. So thank you, Shannon, for accepting my invitation. Thank you for stepping up and sharing your voice. Welcome to the Liminal World.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Usually, I start by asking people to tell a few words about themselves. But today, because we will talk about cultures, with you, I want to start there. So can you share something about the cultural background of your family of origin?
Yeah, so I'm nearly a third generation Canadian. My dad's mom was born in the Dutch East Indies. All my other grandparents were born in Canada, but they come from Poland, England, and Ireland. So quite a good mix in there. And there's a little bit of Chinese in the Dutch side as well.
Nice.
Yeah, and I don't know a whole lot about my great grandparents' migration to Canada. I know my Polish great grandparents came after World War I and were working on a farm. I believe that was in Saskatchewan. I should double check that with my mom. But yeah, I don't know much about why the Irish or the English exactly when or why they came over. Yeah, I grew up in North Vancouver, which has fairly rich mix of cultural backgrounds. So went to school with kids from Iran and different parts of Asia. Lots of my friends had parents from England, Scotland, different parts of Europe and beyond. Yeah.
For me, that was the impressive thing, the most impressive thing. When I came to Canada, I started talking with people about their cultural backgrounds, and I was actually surprised because they didn't see it as anything special, whereas I did, and I still do. Maybe because I love cultures, and anything cross-cultural for me is still new experience. So I love to ask questions, and I love to hear people sharing their stories. And I'm grateful to my fellow Canadians who share those stories with me, because once they are open about their mixed cultural background, I feel that I'm also invited to that table. So I feel accepted. So it's great to hear that you have all those bloods, and in a sense, I'm jealous.
It's nice to hear it from your point of view too, because like you said, for me, it just seems normal. But it's interesting to think about how in other parts of the world that wouldn't be normal, and that's maybe a blessing that we have in Canada.
Music was always part of your life since you were a kid. I enjoy listening you talking about having bands and writing poems and playing guitar, as we can see behind you. You ended up studying guitar at University of British Columbia, and where you got a bachelor degree, music degree. So, but I also know that music was the reason why you took on the why you decided to move to the old continent. And I want to talk with you about that decision.
Sure.
Why and how you made that decision.
Very naively. I was playing in a band called the Belladonnas at the time in Vancouver, and my bandmate didn't really like Vancouver, and we just thought, let's go to London and be rock stars, as you do.
Pick a town. London, why not?
London, it'll be great. At the time, you could get, if you were under 30, there was a 2-year working holiday visa that you could get, so it was doable. So we just decided to turn up in London, but we didn't realize that there was a big recession going on in Europe in 2008.
Yeah.
We were too busy planning a tour and releasing an album, planning a move, to watch the news.
Of course, sometimes it's better. Sometimes it's better not to know, because you wouldn't make that risk.
Exactly. Sometimes you have to almost be naive to take those risks that can actually be really enriching. Thought about it sensibly. It was not a very sensible decision at all.
And how did it go with your band?
It went all right at first. We did some gigging. We both had other jobs, of course, but it didn't work out in the end. We didn't quite become rock stars. But I did start swing dancing, and I met my now husband swing dancing, and I found out about music therapy, which I'd never heard of before. So
your plan changed, like, it's not quite changed. You had completely different story once you ended up in England. So you didn't plan to stay, to study, nothing. You were just wanting to be a rock star, and suddenly, it's interesting for me to hear that. It's interesting because sometimes people think, you should have a plan. But you see, life always has some other plans for us.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember, because I actually did a composition degree at UBC. I studied guitar for a couple of years and then transferred into composition. I kept doing guitar, obviously. But I remember a composition teacher saying to me when I was composing, she said, Shannon, you need to have a plan when you're writing. That plan can change, but you need to have a plan. And I just thought that's actually really good life advice. You should have a plan, but that plan can change. It's a flexible plan. Because I think if you get too attached to this plan, this is how it's going to do, then you miss out on life's opportunities, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But equally, if you have no plan, then you just sort of float and wander.
Yeah.
So it's that balance of having a plan and being flexible with it and adjusting as things happen.
Yeah, beautiful. This is a beautiful advice for life. What I'm interested to hear is, were you actually experiencing so-called culture shock? Because for people who don't know, culture shock is that sense of frustration or anxiety or depression people can feel once they are cut off from their familiar culture. In your case, you went from Vancouver overseas to England. So were you experiencing culture shock?
I don't think I was, because the cultures are similar enough that I don't think it was a shock. And we've all seen Monty Python, like. But I would say it was more of a cultural acclimatization. It was a bit more gradual. It was the same language, but they obviously speak quite differently, and they'd have different expressions. So I do remember being really confused when we first arrived in North London, and everybody kept saying, "You're all right," and I was like, oh, why are they asking me if I'm all right? Because in Canada, if I say, "Are you all right?" it's because you look ill or you're crying or something. And I just kept going, "Yeah, I'm all right. Like, why is everybody asking me, do I look ill?" And I eventually realized that they were asking, how are you doing? How's it going?
Oh, okay.
That's how they ask. You all right? And you're supposed to go, "Yeah, I'm all right. You all right?"
Okay. So you had that. It's not a communication issue, but it is the difference in the way we interact.
Yeah, it's subtle differences. And I think a lot of them didn't even become clear to me in that first sort of 2-year stint I was in England. I think a lot of them sort of became more clear to me when I came back to England for a longer period of time, because when they are such subtle differences, it takes a while to kind of notice them and unpick them. and figure out what's me and what's my culture and what's their culture and what's this person. You know, it's actually quite complicated.
Yeah, yeah. I was in your shoes when I moved to Zagreb from Belgrade, because it was so much things that were the same that I could pay attention to those slight differences, but I wasn't aware how those differences are actually changing me. Like my approach to the way, as you say, the way we communicate. In my case, it was the approach to money. So did you have that, like in the middle of the day, asking yourself, how did I live so far? Like I wasn't aware of the things that for example, I would say or I would do with my money. I had that. Like, and now I'm becoming aware just because I'm exposed to differences in cultures.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I realized is that British people are a little more reserved. And sometimes I think I could come across as like really kooky, kind of like a bit overly expressive, or overly goofy. Like just British people are just a bit more. So, I mean, I think I definitely absorbed a certain amount of that, but I definitely had to be more like that. For example, in work situations, when you're working with, you know, with certain types of people, you can't just go on being your loud, quirky self. It doesn't always sit well. So there's that kind of balance of adapting a little bit when you need to, but still being yourself, because you don't want to be pretending to be someone else. So that was something that I think I juggled much more when I came back to England the second time and was working as a music therapist. I think the first time, because I was more of a newcomer, I had, you know, I still sounded Canadian. People kind of saw me as an outsider, and it was kind of okay that I was a bit odd. And then when I lived there longer, I didn't have such a strong Canadian accent. People couldn't quite figure out why I was a bit different. And I think that was more difficult to navigate.
And how long did you stay in England? That when you came in 2008, how long did you stay?
So that was just under 2 years.
So 2 years. Yeah. Okay, 2 years wouldn't be such a huge period if you have stayed in Vancouver, for example. You would change, you would mature, but you wouldn't change your life. In this case, you wanted to study something new. It's interesting that you said you found your husband, future husband, it was still a boyfriend. You decided to study music therapy. You've changed, like you start dancing, as you said. So I love that when we were talking, you said, Natasha, I planted the seeds for my future life. It was interesting. And I can only imagine what was like for you to come back to Canada. So what did your comeback look like?
I would say I definitely had a little bit of reverse culture shock coming back.
Okay.
Because I changed and I was seeing Vancouver through completely different eyes. I just thought the buildings were really ugly.
Okay.
Architecture. And everything was just really spread out. I felt like people were just moving really slowly. Like just the pace was just like, come on, people, let's move, let's go. Like, hurry up. And I just, I didn't feel like a Vancouverite anymore. And I didn't sound like a Vancouverite. And people would ask me where I was from. And I felt really kind of silly going, I'm from here. I just lived in England for a couple of years. And I felt like, oh God, am I being really pretentious? Like, do they think I'm just like putting on this because I picked up a bit of an English accent, and people must have thought I was putting that on, and you know, oh yes, I'm so European now. And I didn't want to come across like that. It's difficult. What do you do? Like try and put your Canadian accent back on and pretend to be a Vancouverite? You can't sort of just pretend that you haven't changed. And it's interesting, that reminded me of so my father's mother, from the Dutch East Indies, she used to write poems and children's stories and all sorts of things. And I remember years ago stumbling across a notebook with her poetry, and there was a poem that I'm sure was about her returning to the town she was from many years later. And there was a line that said, I am a stranger in this town, it has forgotten me. And that always stuck with me. And I think that really resonates and sums up reverse culture shock really well. And my guess is in her case, the town as well as her had probably changed a lot more than Vancouver for me. But I thought that was very poignant.
Um, I would agree with you that sometimes reverse culture shock is even harder than so-called culture shock, because you, in a sense, you're expecting that you will find something different or something it's unknown. So you are, in a sense, prepared for that. Whereas once you're coming back, you are lost. I would say I felt lost when I first time came back after just 6 months spent in another country. I felt lost because I did actually judging. I realized that I was, in a sense, maybe too critical, to the point that people felt threatened by me. But I didn't want to sound that way. I was just noticing every single detail, and I was pretty vocal. Instead of being quiet and understanding, I didn't have that perspective back then. I was just being so direct and loud that people start withdrawing. And that was actually one of my hardest times in my life. Like when I was like, I don't want to sound this way, but every time I tried to connect, I couldn't. They didn't have this experience, mine experience. They couldn't follow. I couldn't explain. They wasn't interested. I was very sad and angry. Why they didn't want to hear. So we were like losing. Wow, now we are talking about cultural differences. Today is a fire alarm test in my building, which we don't have in my country. So it's good. In a way, it's good that we can experience cultural differences, firsthand. So did you have that? Did you feel that people were you aware that you're judging people too harsh, or that it's not that they cannot connect or accept you, that it's just there is a gap now between you and them?
Yeah, I mean, don't know. Maybe I did judge people. I don't think I saw it that way at the time. I didn't want to judge people, but
I know.
you see them differently. And yeah, it's difficult. I think I'm trying to remember what it was like when I came back. Like a lot of my friends had I still saw them, but they had new groups of friends that I wasn't a part of. So, and it wasn't that anybody was mean or unwelcoming. It was just that, their lives had moved on in one way and I'd been away, and I didn't necessarily fit in the same way I had before. And then also, like with the swing dance scene in Vancouver, that was completely different than what I was used to in London. The music was slower, nobody dressed up, nobody did their hair, nobody seemed interested. Well, not nobody. I did meet some nice people, but it was much less social. It was more like I'm out to exercise and work on my moves. And I wanted to have fun and let loose and meet people. And it wasn't really like that at the time. And I mean, I do want to qualify that by saying I did meet a few really nice people, and it's a nice scene, and it has changed in Vancouver since then, because I have been back since then. But at the time, I just felt like I was a foreigner, and I didn't really fit into this scene that I discovered in London that I loved. And I thought, great, it's in Vancouver too, but it wasn't the same. And I probably was really judgy of swing dancers and the way they were dancing and the music they were dancing to. And now I can see that in better perspective and understand where they were coming from and why it's a different culture. The swing dance culture within the Canadian culture, within the Vancouver culture, is different than the swing dance culture within the British culture, the London culture. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. And it's not bad, it's just different. So that was tough.
Yeah, I think that although we don't want that, I think that stage of comparing things is normal, and you have to be also in that stage, to get to the point where you have perspective. You think this is the first or second step. You don't understand, you're comparing, you're judging either or, in order to find that fine line in between. How long did you stay in Vancouver once you were back from England?
I was there just over a year, and I was just living at home and working to save up to go back to England because before I left, I applied to the MA Music Therapy program in Anglia Ruskin University. So I got accepted into that, deferred my entry. So yeah, that year in Canada, I was just working and just waiting to go back to England.
Okay, so now you knew where are you going. You knew British culture or society a bit. You had your many reasons to go back. You had the boyfriend, you passed the audition, so you had your studies. So how did this, it was 2011?
Yeah.
Okay, so 2011, it was your second entry to England. How did it go?
It was really good, actually. Really enjoyed my course. I lived in Cambridge for the first 6 months because that's where my course was based. And I started cycling there, which was really scary at first because I hadn't really cycled as an adult, but it was Cambridge. Like, how are you going to get around? You're going to sit on the bus in traffic or you're going to get on your bike.
Oh, okay.
So that was a good experience for me. So yeah, had a great time on the course. And then when I finished the course, I got married to Anthony. I found a job working as an administrator for a music therapy charity, and then also some work with a nonprofit as a music therapist. Did different contracts with them.
We will
Yeah.
talk about music therapy a bit because that's a new land for me. To be honest, I don't know much about music therapy. Can you say a few words about right now? Can you use this opportunity to say a few words about music therapy?
Sure. So music therapy is an evidence-based practice, and we use music to work towards aims with clients. And that can be anyone from children on the autism spectrum. It can be work with older people with Alzheimer's. It can be hospice care, hospitals. It can be mainstream schools, children with emotional and behavioral difficulties. So there's a huge range of client groups, and then depending on the client, we'll establish certain aims, and we'll have different activities, different musical activities, different interventions that we'll use to try and work towards those aims. And then we'll evaluate, and then at a certain point, and see if we need to come up with some new aims or different interventions. So it's very much using music to work towards non-musical aims, but music really motivates people and connects with people. And a lot of times, for example, I did a lot of work with children on the autism spectrum, and they're quite often nonverbal or find it difficult to verbalize emotions. So music is such a great communication tool and a way to connect without needing those words. And you can do so much within music, you can communicate so much. So usually it's, not just me making music, it's the client making music, and it's about those musical interactions. We can all make music, we can all hit a drum, we can all bang some piano keys. It might not be Chopin, but that's not the point. The point is that we're expressing, we're communicating, and we're connecting through that. So to me, that's the powerful thing about music therapy.
Yes, I was actually researching a bit because of you, and I found out that the core value is that what they say, our ability to express and connect with, express ourselves and connect with others is actually the core of our emotional and mental well-being. So you're actually using music to support that development and health and well-being, which is really great. Which is really great. But you see, your profession is, as you said, client-based. So it depends on every individual, every kid or senior you get in contact with. So you have to always, even in your profession, not just in life as an immigrant, you have to find that fine line, between you and them, between activities you propose or what they will bring back to you. It's always, it's not juggling, but being in that space, fine line in between. It's a hard job. It's a hard.
It's a balancing act. And I remember when I was training, I remember thinking, how am I going to do this? There's so much to think about at once. I'm trying to think about the client, how they're presenting, what they need, all the interventions I've learned, the psychoanalytic theories I've learned, and my music skills. How am I going to do this all at once? But it's like anything, a certain amount of it becomes almost automatic when you're in that mindset. So you can focus on different things, but there's certain things that kind of just happen automatically. So it becomes easier to sort of multitask and manage all those different thought processes. But yeah, it's definitely still always a learning curve and a balance. Never a dull moment.
Yes, yes, Shannon. And that's what it's like sometimes to be an immigrant as well. You are constantly juggling. You are individual, but you're exposed to so many different inputs, and you're always something else with somebody else. And what is that fine line? I liked talking with you when you say it's a fine line between authenticity and flexibility. I love that, what you once wrote. It is how to remain myself, how to still be this, but then be part of everything else that is coming my way, and respond in a not just welcoming, but to participate. Sometimes it's just willingness to participate and accept something that is different than yours. But I love it. I love it. You're actually doing that in your own life, plus in your profession. So I applaud you, because it's a hard job. Tough.
Thank you. I never thought about those parallels before, so it's interesting to think about.
I want to talk about something that I've experienced, for example, in Canada. You were in London. Why it's the same, I will say. You were in London, and in London there are so many different cultures, not just British, but people who came to that university or who were in your neighborhood who were from somewhere else. So what was your connection to them? Is there any culture that you were drawn to, and if you can share some story about that?
The Greeks.
The Greeks. Let's talk about Greece.
My soul is Greek. So one of the first people that I met when I first moved to London was a lovely Greek Cypriot girl who I became good friends with. And then when I was studying, there was a Greek Cypriot on my course, and then another lovely lady from Crete who was on the drama therapy. We studied alongside a drama therapy cohort, which was really great as well. And those are the two people that I've really kept in touch with here and there from my course. I was just so I'm always so drawn to Greek people. There's just a warmth about them, and I just feel like we understand each other, we connect. So as soon as we could, of course, I had to go to Greece.
I just wanted to ask, have you been to Greece?
Oh, yes. We went quite a few times when we lived in London. So we went on our honeymoon to Milos and Folegandros in the Cyclades. And then we went to Crete, we went to Chalkidiki, and we spent a month in Kefalonia before we moved to Canada. So, and it's just so beautiful. The food's delicious. The ocean's just the right temperature. We tend to go in the spring or the fall, so around, not when it's crowded. And I just love it. I feel like it's my spiritual home.
They are very expressive. Yes. I know. I spent first time abroad. I spent on Cyprus, and I couldn't see differences. In many situations, I couldn't see differences between my society. And we started this conversation with you saying how you were too expressive sometimes for British people. So maybe that's the connection.
Yes, probably. I didn't feel like I had to tone myself down around Greek people, you know.
Did you adopt something from them? Did you bring some custom, tradition, way of, I don't know, expressing from, just from them? Because we tend to do that. Once you're exposed to different cultures, you start being that blend, like, oh my God, I love this. It's appreciation. I want to say that these days, a lot of people are talking about cultural appropriation, but what I'm experiencing in my life is more cultural appreciation. People are really welcome, like open to hear about others and take on some parts that they really appreciate. They really appreciate, and they want to, you know, make their life richer. I do that, and I don't mind when somebody is doing the same with the things that I'm bringing with my culture. So did you have something similar? Similar experience? Yes.
I'm trying to think. I mean, definitely we make Greek dishes. We like to make dolmades.
I grew up, for example, with dolmades. We call them differently, but I grew up with that.
Yeah.
For example, in Canada, we don't have those baskets. You know, when people are, for example, when I became Canadian, I got a basket full of goodies, Canadian goodies. The same was when I bought an apartment. People came, I was like, what is that? Basket. Like, what is a basket? Oh, that's like, for us in our culture, that's not common. People will bring you plant, but not a basket full of phenomenal food, And now I found myself thinking, when I have to, you know, visit my friend, oh, I could make a basket. You know, it's not that I'm stealing something from Canadians, but I embrace that into my life because I love the custom.
Yeah, I do like wishing people Kalumina, which is Happy New Month, which is what the Greeks say at the start of every new month. And I think that's a really nice thing. Like, why do we only do that when it's a new year? Why don't we do it every time it's a new month? So I do sometimes just send out little text messages. I think my mom still doesn't know what it means, but sometimes I'll be like, Kalumina.
After 8 years spent in England, where you got married and you had your career and your community and dancing community and neighborhood, like you probably adjusted to British culture. Did you actually thought, this is not it, I will go again to some third place or back home? Did you ever thought about that during those 8 years? Or you consider England as your home?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely considered it as my home, and I thought I was going to stay there forever. But I think towards the end of those 8 years, definitely Anthony and I both started kind of thinking about possibility of moving.
So what brought you back?
I think there's a combination of factors. Wanting to just kind of have a slightly slower pace of life and better quality of life. We had long commutes in London, and we were too tired to go out and do anything and enjoy London. And we were just feeling a bit tired, wanted to change. I thought it might be nice to be near my parents for a little while. I was away for a long time. And then I think there was also just so much growing anti-immigration sentiment, making the visa rules more and more stringent, more difficult. And then Brexit happened, which was really, really upsetting for me. Even though I'm not European, I realized, but as an immigrant in London at the time, and I think most of England would have felt the same way, it felt like it was an anti-immigration vote. And I realized there were lots of other reasons that people voted to leave, but the overwhelming feeling at the time was that this was a vote about immigration, and this was British people saying, we don't want immigrants. And it felt really hurtful on a personal level that I didn't expect. Like, I felt like I'd just been dumped by my boyfriend. I know it sounds weird, but it was the same feeling of like rejection. That really upset me, and I didn't expect Brexit to happen, but I didn't expect that if it did happen, I would feel it on such a personal level. So yeah,
which means that you build those connections, and you put your roots, and you wanted to consider that as your home, and you treated it that way, and suddenly you felt like somebody's pushing you out, which is a hard experience to go through.
Yeah, it wasn't pleasant, but I mean, I should say that I never felt that from the people that I knew. I never felt it directed towards me personally from people I knew. It was more, it felt like the government, the Home Office. But I think what was also kind of difficult for me was when people would talk to me about like being somewhat anti-immigration, and I just sort of look at them and be like, you do realize I'm an immigrant? And a lot of them would say, oh, I don't think of you as an immigrant. And you just think, well, what do you think an immigrant is? Immigrant is someone who chooses to live or has to live in a country where they weren't born. Like that's me. If you start saying, well, it's only certain types of immigrants, well, then you're walking a fine line, right? So that was difficult as well.
When you came back to Canada, that was 2019. I wanna have that timeline, So you went 2011 to Britain and you came back 2019 to Canada. Oh my God, 2019 was just before 2020, and we know that 2020 was a huge time of change for the whole globe. So I can only imagine what was like to be in transition, starting over in Canada, and then experiencing Corona with self-isolation and everything. Oh my God, help me to understand what was like to be you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it makes it harder or easier if you haven't yet sort of established your life when the pandemic hit. In some ways, I think, well, maybe it was easier because we didn't have this sort of life established that then got interrupted. We were kind of just getting things going, and then it got, okay.
Okay, this is a good point. I always think, oh my God, people were, if you have your life and now you have to only juggle with the work or with the homeschooling, is easier than if you are in, transition. But this is a good point. So you're constantly juggling. So this is just one more thing that you have to deal with. Oh, I love this. So how did you juggle with 2020?
For me, it didn't, there was sort of definitely a month of where everything, when it first happened, as just kind of stopped, paused. And I was just doing very little bits of work from home. And that was a strange month. I remember, cycling downtown to get something. I don't even know what, and just felt like you were in like a Hollywood movie set on a post-apocalyptic movie. It was very strange. There's nobody there, and most of the shops closed, or just handing things through the door. But after that, so I learned how to do music therapy online. So that was a new skill I had to learn. I went to lots of Zoom workshops and watched YouTube videos. So then I kind of restarted some online sessions. And then here in Victoria, things did start to open up a little bit in the summer. So yeah, I started doing a few more in-person sessions with all the new precautions in place, and all the hand sanitizer and the masks, and singing in a mask. Let me tell you, not the easiest thing, but can be done. So kind of after that first month or two, things kind of for me have just ticked along. Almost normal way, not normal, obviously, but
different, still things were moving forward.
Yeah.
Yes, but interesting how, what they say, necessity is a mother of invention. So this was like, how I'm going to be a music therapist when we are in self-isolation. And suddenly you said, I could do it, and I could do it online. Like, who would have thought about that? Before 2020, I would say it's impossible.
Yeah, I would have definitely said it was impossible if you'd said, "Look, can't you do music therapy online?" And I would have had a long list of reasons why I can't do it online. And it's true that there's certain things you can't do online, and there's certain clients that can't connect that way. But I think what we've all learned is we can do so much more online than we thought we could. And for most of my clients, it's at least better to have something than to have nothing. And there are still, certain things that you can do online, and certain things that I've even seen my clients do better online, which surprised me. Like turn taking, for example, I found online that for some reason that works in a way that sometimes in person they're less likely to wait. Maybe it's just the internet lag.
No, it's interesting because I've noticed that with my kids' classes online. Like she would be so quiet, and she says, "I have to wait my turn." And teacher will say my name. That's the moment when I can speak up. Whereas in the usual school environment, she would just raise her hands or just talk. So it is true. It is true. You know, a lot of people were doing decluttering. You know, once they were at home, they finally got a time and find energy to do the big spring cleaning, so-called spring cleaning. Whereas for you, because you did that a year before you moved, for you, it could only be an expansion, or maybe how to make my life more like a richer. What can I do to make it like richer, really? Like I think now that you could only go wide and high, whereas others had to dive deep in, you know?
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I think, what was I going to say? I had a thought, and then it just left. I think it was also a good moment to pause, because when you move somewhere, you start sort of building your new life, and at the beginning it's like anything is possible, but then you very quickly get into a bit of a groove, and it was a moment for me where it was like, is that the groove I want to be in? Oh, hang on. So there was a sense of kind of just reevaluating.
I'm just wondering, did you start anything like really new?
Funny, you should ask, Natasha.
Right?
I did write a novel, actually, strangely. I was actually planning on writing a nonfiction book, and I had chatted with a few friends about collaborating, and we'd kind of try and figure something out. And that kind of just fizzled, and I was still thinking, okay, I still want to write a book. And then I actually had a dream that I started a novel, and I dreamed the first line, and I woke up the next morning and just thought, well, that was weird. Like, and I told a few friends, and they said, oh, you should write that. It's a great first line. It's like, really? But somehow it just grew in my head, and the first line just evolved into a big story that I just suddenly had to get out, and I had to write down. And I spent weeks, like every moment that I wasn't at work, I was just at my computer typing, because I just had to get this thing out. So I'm still in the process of doing some research and some editing on that, but that's been new and unexpected.
This is like a self-discovery. You started with music and then discovered dance in England, as you said, and suddenly it's writing. It's another way of expressing, oh my God, this is beautiful. Will I be able to read that?
Yes, hopefully. I'm hoping to have it sort of done by the end of the summer, and then I'll either self-publish or I might send to some small publishers. But yeah, definitely, I would love you to read it and get your thoughts on it. It's mostly set in Greece, so set between Vancouver and Crete and Cornwall. So there's a lot of talk about different cultures and different cultural juxtapositions.
Okay. I want to read. I'm interested in everything cross-cultural. I am interested to hear and read. It's beautiful. It's beautiful that writing can be hard. Writing really can be hard, but it's a great tool for healing or processing things. So maybe you're processing everything you've learned so far, or everything you went through. Did you think about that?
Yeah, it's funny because I remember the first time you said that to me, I was sort of like, oh, I don't know, it's not about me. And then the more I reflect on it, I realize, like, I mean, the main character isn't me, but there's so many parallels between what some things that she goes through or other characters go through. There's definitely parallels. Of course, you draw on your own experiences when you're writing. What else do you have to draw on? And so I think the more I'm reflecting on it, the more I am seeing that it is processing a lot of things from the past, not just the past year, but my whole life. And the traveling back and forth, living in different cultures. And it was really interesting because when I was writing certain parts of it, I was getting very emotional because the characters go through hard, difficult, challenging times, and in order to communicate that, I found I had to feel it while I was writing it. So my poor husband would come in and be like, why are you crying? Fine, it's just my character's going through a really tough time. I can't talk right now. And he kept going, why don't you just change the story and make it happier? And I said, I can't. I'm telling a story that's out, like, it doesn't feel like I'm making up the story. It felt like I was discovering the story. It's there. I'm like, I can't change it. Like,
Yes.
no, it's not mine to change, which sounds like a weird thing to say, but
Yeah.
it didn't feel like I could.
Yes. And sometimes we are getting to the joy through sadness.
Yes.
Through sadness. And I didn't say just like that, you're processing. I know that for a fact because I wrote a book in 2018, I published, but I wrote it 2016. Like you, out of nowhere, I started writing. I never thought about that. But while I was doing that, I actually realized, oh my God, I'm actually making the sense of everything I've been through so far. So I know how powerful, but how excruciating it can be. You know, it is. You have to put everything in place and you have to see sometimes yourself or your characters from a different perspective, and that's emotional. But it's great. You're coming out of Corona times by discovering that writing skill, and your grandma, Dutch grandma that you mentioned at the beginning, probably is proud of you now.
I think she might have been involved in that dream, actually.
You never know, because I loved when we were speaking, you said, Natasha, she was actually writing in a second or third language. English was her third language.
Yeah.
Bravo for her.
I know.
And she was actually publishing that in magazines.
She published like children's stories and poems definitely in magazines. And then I found out recently from my dad that she also wrote novels that were never published. And I never knew that. And I said, where are they? And he said, I don't know. I want to read them.
Okay, the last thing I want to talk with you is about this current situation of re-entry. So we are in, I don't want to say post-corona times, but with the vaccine, 90% people on Vancouver Island are vaccinated. So we are actually getting back to normal. Things are pretty as usual, but still there is a lot of change. And we've changed, our practices change, our habits change. So this was 15 months of really, I call that immigration, but somebody can say transition. You were someone who went through those similar processes for many times in your life. And is there any advice you would give to people who might feel frightened by this change, or unwilling to accept it, or having hard time to get along with their own community, town, and people around them?
I think it's, important to be open and not to expect everything to just go back to exactly how it was before coronavirus, because we're just going to be disappointed and frustrated because we've been through this thing, and like, yes, we're going to come out of it, but we've changed and the world has changed and society has changed. And I think the tendency, the easy thing is to want to just like sweep everything under the rug that was bad and difficult and pretend it didn't happen. But actually it's much healthier to own that and process it and learn from it and grow from it, and accept that the new post-corona world is not going to be like the old one. It's going to be different, and also it's easy to idealize the past a lot, I think, because it's not here now, and keep looking back going, oh, but it was better then. But that's not really helpful either. It is what it is, and we can make this new, make the future good, better. We can grow from what we've been through, and I hope that that's what we do, personally and as a society. I hope we don't sweep it under the rug and try to go back to normal. I hope we have a new normal that we've grown within.
Everybody learns something, in every profession, every individual, every family went through some, a process of learning, process of losing, process of change. For example, why would you give up your writing if you just discover there is some other medium that you can express yourself at? Like, why would you give up that experience? Why? Or for example, in my kids' school, teachers had so much things to handle this last year. with community, with parents, with one another, how to communicate, how to organize. Why would I say, oh, let's get back to normal and we won't use everything we know now? You were in a struggle, I always say, for a reason. So sometimes I think those challenges are, how to say, they will break you in order to make you.
Yes.
So what is now made can be different, but can be good, you know, can be foundation for something that is coming and which is, I would say, let's hope, good.
Yes, yes, that's a good way of putting it, to be broken and then remade. But I think when you're remade, you're stronger in a way.
Yes, yes. And don't forget the process, because we all collected, I think we all collected a lot of information from this challenges. We learn about ourselves, you know, as well as about others. So we should use that. And also to keep the memory of this year. We shouldn't forget. What do you think about that? Like people putting aside Corona, okay, it didn't happen. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think it's such a natural tendency. And I know I've said things like that too, like, oh, I'm just going to pretend that last year didn't happen. You know, we all do it. It's so natural. I think anytime you've been through a trauma of any sort, you just, there's a part of you that just wants to go, just going to pretend it's not there. But then if you don't own that and process it, it'll come back and bite you in the bum later. So it's better to take the slightly harder route of processing, learning, growing, because eventually you're going to have to. So and it'll be easier to do it now than shove it away and have it come back later. It'll come back in worse form, I think.
Do you feel like playing?
Oh, I guess I could improvise something.
Music really makes you feel better and hopeful, more hopeful and uplifted. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.